Live. I'm live. Welcome. This is the Right Now Show, and I'm your host, Valerie Ihsan. And today I've got a special guest, Serena Dory, with me. We are going to be talking about adding humor to our writing. But first, why don't you introduce yourself and talk about what you write?
Hi, I'm Serena Dory, and I write mostly science fiction, fantasy, humor. This is one of my books that it's in the series Womby's School for Wayward Witches. The book is Tardy Bells and Witches' Spells. It's the first book in the series. I have a lot of other books out there as well. I'm a hybrid author, so that means I have some things traditionally published and some things self-published, but I also sell short stories to magazines. And I would say the majority of what I write, even though sometimes I would say it's genre specific, that it's fantasy or it's science fiction or it's humor or horror or mystery or romance or any other genre, I would say there's almost always humor in the writing that I do. And sometimes you can tell that, like, just looking at the covers, sometimes they're kind of quirky.
Whimsical.
The titles, like, sometimes I just have quirky titles, like I had a dragon fantasy story called 50 Scales of Gray, or one of my books is Reading, Writing, and Necromancy. So, like, you can kind of tell, like, it's going to be something kind of weird and quirky just from looking at the titles or genre, like the covers. But like I have short stories, and I've sold over 150 short stories to magazines, and the majority of those were humor, but they were science fiction or fantasy humor. And some people will say that it's really hard to sell humor, but that's the majority of what I know. So it's hard for me to compare it to anything else. Like, is it really harder to sell dark fantasy versus humorous fantasy? It just depends, and
On the market, I would imagine.
For short stories, I know there's certain magazines that they like more literary, and they are not going to be the places I sell humorous short stories. Or there are certain magazines out there that do take short stories, but the word count that they're looking for is usually shorter. So instead of a 10,000 word short story or a 7,000 word short story, it might be a 2,000 word short story. And it is harder to sell a funny 10,000 word story, but it's just harder to tell or sell a 10,000 word story, period.
Is it harder to write humor in shorter pieces?
No, it's just, I think it's harder to write shorter pieces in general. So, like, here in Eugene, we have the Step Into Short Stories contest that was hosted by Word Crafters, and it was flash fiction, and I want to say it was 300 words. So it's really, really short, and that's hard to write something short. Or there's a lot of flash fiction markets that like pieces that are under 1,000 words. It's just hard to write 1,000 words. It's hard to write flash fiction, but
And tell a complete story.
yeah, and for it not to be a vignette. So I would say for me, it is not a challenge to tell a story that's funny, because that's just naturally what I do. It's harder for me to have a serious, grim story, and sometimes even in my dark stories, like, I will just write a story and it's just weird, but it's dark, and every once in a while there'll still be like a little funny line here or there, because that's just like what I do. but it's not but it's not necessarily more difficult to squeeze in humor into something.
It's not
It's
difficult.
not for me.
Do you know people in person that are not especially, like, funny, but they still write humor well? Or does it take a funny person to write funny?
I don't know. Sometimes when I think about, well, like, my daily life, I'm a school teacher, I'm not very funny. I mean, at least teenagers don't laugh at my jokes, so I don't know.
I don't think they laugh at anything.
No, it just depends. So I would say, like, well, I guess it's your audience, because you might, with a certain group of friends, they think you're funny, and the humor that you have, whether it's like a self-deprecating humor or a sarcastic humor, it might work in that specific group, but it might not work in another group.
That's true. Yeah.
So knowing your market, like knowing your audience, whether your audience is like the readers of a book or a group of people you associate with. So but I do know people who are just not funny. But I don't think they're writing humor. So I don't know. Most of the people that are writing humor have some kind of sense of humor, even if it's not a sense of humor I appreciate.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Their audience appreciates
it somehow.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, but we kind of got started super fast there. So let's go back to the check-in portion of the show. I have been AWOL for a really long time. I've been on vacation, and I went on a writer's retreat, and there's more vacations coming up, so summers are really hard to stick with this weekly schedule. But and as you see, Joanna and Julie are not here. Joanna is in New York picking up her kiddos from a trip they went on, and Julie is out at the farm working on some farm emergency thing. So it's me and Serena today. So check-in wise, I'm back from the writing retreat. I finished a draft of the memoir I was working on, and I sent that out to my alpha readers, and of which, are you one? No, not anymore. You used to be, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm meeting with them next week and getting some feedback on that, and I was able to start working on a novel that I had started and dropped last year, excuse me. I replotted that again and replotted it so it's not a romance at all. It's going to be women's fiction, and I'm trying to add in character flaws and more character development. And Serena gave me quite a talking to the last time I said.
I was going to ask, is this the novel that I read?
Yeah, that you didn't like.
There were many good things.
It's
but
totally different.
The thing is, when you submit a rough draft, and I didn't realize it was an alpha draft. I thought it was a beta draft.
Oh, yeah, no.
So like the things that I saw in it I was expecting something farther along.
Yeah, well. No, yeah. Okay, anyway, so that's happening. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that's going on. That's basically what I'm working on right now. So yeah, what have you been doing writing-wise? What are you working on right now?
So I am working on book 8 in this series while simultaneously working on book 7 and wanting to work on book 15. So basically what I'm doing is I always set like really unachievable goals for myself, and sometimes I actually meet them. But like last week my goal was to complete editing book 8, which is tentatively titled Hex in the City, and then to finish the edits that I got back from the copy editor for book 7, which is Reading, Writing, and Necromancy. No, it's Budget Cuts for the Dark Arts and Crafts.
Oh, nice.
I have so many titles now.
Yeah.
I can't keep them straight, so I just call them by number. So I thought, like, I'll get done with that, and I'll start book 15.
Why are you jumping around in a series when you're writing?
Well, sometimes you're waiting to get edits back from someone, so while you're waiting...
9 is next, not 15.
Oh, yeah, it's already written, but it's not edited yet. Oh. So I have to edit book 8 before I edit book 9.
Well, yeah.
So I got the copy edits back, but I only just started those this weekend, so I did not finish that. I did do an edit of book 8, which I was really happy to get through it, but then I got critiques back from my critique group, so now I have to go through those. And then I'm also moving, so I've been moving for weeks. So it's
Are you moving locally?
Yeah, it's just another place like 2 miles away, but just so much to do. And then I'm a school teacher and I go back to work next week, so that's why I was trying to write a novel before school started and finish book 15, because that's the last book in the series. And I say it's book 15, but I don't know, maybe it's really book 14, but maybe it's really going to be book 50. I don't know. So
15 would be a nice number for box sets and stuff.
Would
you could
it?
3,
Okay.
yeah, 3. Usually there's 3 in a box set, so then you have 5 box sets, and then you could do the whole Harry Potter thing, where you do the whole series all together.
Okay. I had originally wanted 13 books in the series because it's a book about witches, and it seemed like 13 is a witchy number, but it just hasn't worked out that way. And so, I want to be done with this series because it's a long-term project, and it would be nice to be done with this project of writing novels and go back to writing short stories.
Oh,
Because
so
I enjoy writing short stories.
okay. And then how fast are you releasing these?
I did a rapid release starting back in May. And
Okay.
part of a rapid release idea is that you put out one book, and I don't know if it's a week later or 2 weeks later, you put out another book, and another couple weeks later, you put out another book. And Amazon promotes books that are put out in a closer span of time. And then each month,
The 30-day cliff.
yes, yeah, each month I've been putting out another book. So, book 7 has been released, and so I've been doing that schedule, which is part of the reason why I'm working on so many projects at once, because I'm editing one project and then proofreading another project in between and trying to get all that stuff out so that I can keep up that monthly schedule.
Do you ever get mixed up when you're
Yeah, chronologically, yeah. Fortunately, it's the same cast of characters. I would not be able to switch worlds because I write science fiction and fantasy, and there's different rules in like one fantasy world versus another fantasy world. And I was working on my steampunk novel series, and then every once in a while I would work on fantasy something, and the voice and the rules, and I would get things mixed up, and the characters, and then one character would sound like another character, and so I just had to stop writing that series, just focus on this series, and eventually I'll go back to writing short stories or writing something else.
Nice. Wow. That was a lot.
Yeah.
How do you balance out your work life and your writing life and your teaching and your publishing and your...
I don't.
This is a show about balance.
I know. When I saw the title, I was like, oh, about balance. I'm like, the BAM of balance. I'm like, there's no balance in my life. It's all one thing, like for a lump of time, or it's another thing. And so like the thing in my life right now is just this series and these books and witches and fairies and things related to that. And then I will go to like another world, and everything in my life is around steampunk. And in order to like immerse myself in that world, I watch period movies and look at like period fashion, and and I would say part of like the research and immersing myself in humor, because this is a really quirky, funny series, I have to expose myself to humorous things.
Okay.
And so like I suppose you could call it research, but it's more enjoyment. It's just getting my mind in the right place. So I'll watch videos that are parodies of Harry Potter, because my book has a lot of it's called, the series is Wombi's School for Wayward Witches, so there are some parallels between like the idea of Harry Potter, but this school is like for at-risk youth. So since I'm a school teacher, it's more of like my experiences of like the imperfect experiences of a teacher at a school where like if my students had magic, the things that they would be doing are not the things that the kids are doing in Harry Potter.
Right.
Like so I think like what kind of things can I expose myself to? Well, I'm a school teacher already, so I'm already in that world. More than I would like sometimes. but also like watching videos of things that are related to magic or humor or things that inspire me and keep me in that right frame of mind.
What kind of videos would a person watch to prep them for the humor?
Okay.
Writing humor.
I like watching YouTube clips of Saturday Night Live. I like Studio B, or maybe it's Studio C. But they have a lot of humor, and they actually have a lot of Harry Potter parodies already that I'll watch. I'm like, haha, Voldemort, haha, or Snape on a date, haha, that's so funny. And then, you know, it gets my brain in the right place. I look at a lot of memes, or I love Pinterest, and I have like a funny Pinterest, a couple funny Pinterest folders that I will organize by, here's my funny science fiction, here's my funny fantasy, and here's my funny witches, and I'll look at those. And also just in my daily life, a lot of the people that I associate with say goofy things. And I have like a little journal, a little book, like the book that you have. And when I am in public places and I hear people say just weird, random things, I write them down. And sometimes I will go through that book and I will say, hey, this really fits the scene that I'm writing. I should put this in. Because I cannot, I mean, sometimes I'm writing and the creativity flows and funny things just come out. But sometimes there are scenes that I think this would be a little bit stronger, or the humor in it would be stronger if I put something more in there. Or this is kind of getting a little dark here. I need to break it up with some humor. And I will look in my little journal and see like what kind of things fit. And my husband says a lot of goofy things, so I write down things he says, and he always says, please don't tell anyone I said that, because, just words come out of your mouth, and it's okay if a character says that, or someone, like, but he doesn't want anyone to know that he has said these things, because maybe it would be horrible. Or since I am a teacher in a classroom, there are things that students say, and sometimes it's actually really horrible things, but if you remove enough time, like a year later, you say, actually, that was pretty funny. or if you take it out of that context, it becomes a funny thing. So a couple years ago when I was teaching middle school, there was a kid who got in a fight with another kid, and when I tried to talk to him about it, he said, does this look like a face that cares? And it was, at the time it was like, oh, this is so horrible. But I wrote it down because I realized that is just such a weird random thing. And then I did put that in a short story about a teacher teaching aliens, and the alien who says it doesn't actually have a face. So like I changed the context, but I do get quite a bit of inspiration from just my daily life and normal things that people say. I have this little book that I keep in my pocket, and so if I'm not at home, I can just write little things. I have one next to my bed, because usually the weirdest things, weird, funny things that my husband says, it's like in bed as we're laying down, going to sleep, and we're not really sleeping. He will just keep talking and saying like, tell me like some random story that he has some I don't know, response to, and it's his responses to these stories on the news or whatever that I'm like, this is just too good. Or there was a student last year that she was talking, I overhear these conversations that students have that they don't even know, if I say anything to them, they are shocked that I heard them or listened to them, which I'm like, okay, you're sitting right by my desk, why would I not hear you? But
it's like parents not thinking their toddlers can hear what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
But hear everything.
Yeah, but 15-year-olds think that their teachers don't hear them, and so which sometimes they don't. But there are times I really do try to block out their conversations. But last year there was a girl saying to another girl, I can't wait for season 5 because God is hot. And I just thought like that line, God is hot, would be like hilarious and something.
Yeah.
And so, these are like, I have one of these little books at my desk, and I write down the random things that I hear people say. And they are random things. And there are so many times in life that we are in public or we're at a meeting and someone just says something really funny. And it's usually funny because it's unexpected. You don't think someone's going to say that. And you say to yourself, I want to remember that later because I'm going to put that in my story. But you never do because we don't write it down and we forget it later because there's 5 other jillion things in our unbalanced writers' lives.
Yes.
And so I do write these things down, and I really like this book because it actually has a little pen
that
with
goes
it.
with it.
So in a roundabout, like, because I think your original question was like, how do you balance your writer's life? I don't. I obsessively do one thing and then another thing, which means that I sometimes don't eat or I don't sleep because I'm writing.
Oh.
And
I'm way into sleeping and eating.
I really
At
like
the expense
both.
of my writing.
I really like both of those things. And of course, there are times that I say, I'm not going to write because this room is too messy and I need to clean it, and I'm really procrastinating. But usually I have like these timelines and these goals and I have to meet them. And there are times that my house goes being not clean for long periods of time unless someone's coming over and I have a reason, like I have to do this.
Uh-huh.
But my husband, he's okay with not having a clean house, and I probably shouldn't say anything about his cleaning skills on YouTube because it'll get back to him. But that's not important to him. So, like it's okay with him if I don't clean for a while, and he doesn't notice like the grime in the bathroom. That I will notice it. It will bother me, but I will say I'm gonna keep writing, and then I just keep writing and writing,
Yeah.
and then I get up too early because I'm writing, or I go to bed too late because I'm writing, and then I use my lunch break and I'm writing, and I just have to do it, and then I get done with a project and I say, oh, we're out of toilet paper. And it's like Romancing the Stone. Like, I don't know if you've seen that movie in the 80s.
Years ago.
And
yeah, I don't remember really, other than she was a writer.
She was a writer, and at the beginning of the movie, we're in her head, and she's writing the novel, and then she's done, and she's crying because it was so beautiful, and she doesn't have any tissue. Her tissue box is empty, and there's like a note that says buy more tissue, and so she goes to the bathroom to like get toilet paper to like wipe her eyes, but there's a note that says buy toilet paper, and there's all these post-its all over her house that tell her all the things that she's neglected that she had to do, and
because she was writing.
Yeah, and that is exactly what my life is like. And I do have post-its everywhere that are telling me, and I actually washed the list off my hand in case like people are like, oh, I'm talking with my hands, but I have this list of all the things I need to buy today after we get done, and I took a photo on my phone so that I could go to the store and go buy all these things.
That's hilarious. Okay, so you were talking before about having a dark moment. I need to add some humor to balance that out. So are there types of humor that you would put, I don't know how to say this. Is there a genre of humor that matches another genre of writing that you would, like, I wouldn't put this kind of humor with this genre. I would put this kind of humor with this genre. Is that go through your mind? Is that true? Are there rules about what kind of humor goes with what kind of writing?
I don't know about the kind of writing. For me, I just have my own personal kind of humor that I put into my novels, and it's going to be pretty consistently my humor. And so it works for me. It works for putting it into fantasy and science fiction and romance and mystery and even horror, because I don't write, I rarely write really dark, gruesome horror. The horror that I write, it's funny horror. So there might be zombies who are eating people's brains, but then they're making jokes about like, oh, this is a scientist that I'm eating, like, you know, or whatever. So for me that works, but I would say the thing that I notice I have to do is I have to be careful where I put the humor.
Okay.
Because we don't want to put humor where it breaks up the tension or the conflict in a scene. That if we are trying to increase tension and increase suspense and there's too much humor or humor in the wrong place, then it could break that.
Just slow it down.
Yeah, it could slow it down or decrease the tension completely. Like if the main character is like making a joke, instead of focusing on like, hey, we're all going to die right now, like we have to save the world or whatever the conflict is, it's going to take away from that. So sometimes I do have a side character making the comments instead of the main character.
Oh, okay.
Because the main character needs to continue to feel that worry or tension over what is going to happen. But this is like me and the genres that I write. So what works for me might not necessarily work for someone else. I know that you write nonfiction, memoir, and so there might be times that if you're writing something about the real world, it might not be appropriate to make a joke about that. And I remember a couple years ago, I went to a workshop by Lee Ann Joshua. Joshua, I think is how you say her last name. And she is a local writer, and she teaches comedy, and she had taught at the Willamette Writers Conference a couple years ago. And she had this great presentation on humor, but one of the things she said is like, some people will say, this is a subject that you cannot make fun of or put humor into because it is serious. And but her like assertion was like, you really can. It just depends how you do it. And there was a lady in the audience that said, my book is about adoption, and that is not funny. And I don't know why she went to the humor workshop, but she wanted to put humor in there, but then she was also adamant, like, this is not something that you can make fun of or make jokes about or have humor. And I think Leanne Joshua had like said, well, you could say this or you could compare it to that, or she had some ideas, but the person there like was really adamant against it. So I would say like it really depends on the author and
the tone of the book too.
The tone of the book, and it's true. Like there are some people with their personal experiences that it was such a traumatic thing. It's not going to be something that person feels comfortable talking about in a humorous way, because it's not humorous. Be a year or longer, and then you finally say like, yeah, wasn't that horrible when I broke my knee and I slipped on the ice, and it was so horrible, but then you're laughing about it. And I guess it just depends on, like, you have to have the right state of mind for it. And if you are not
for reading it or for writing it,
for writing it, definitely. Like if you don't find it funny yourself, you're not going to be able to talk about it in a way. But also if if you're the reader and you're had this traumatic experience, and then you're reading something that is funny, it, like, depending on how it was handled, it might not have been handled correctly, or it might still be too fresh and traumatic to read a book about that subject matter. So I don't know, like, humor is so subjective, and it is very different from other genres in that, like, it is so subjective that what is funny to one person is not going to be funny to another person.
So you really have to find your readership.
Yeah, the thing about just one genre like science fiction, if it has technology or if it's futuristic or something else, there's no argument that it's science fiction. If it's fantasy and there's a witch or a fairy or a werewolf or whatever, there's no argument that that's fantasy. But with humor, there's a lot of subjectivity that we could say, that's not funny. And I say that to my husband all the time. That joke was not funny. Yeah. And he's like, well, I'm laughing. Yeah.
So I have a list of questions here, and I don't think I'm going to get through all of them. So I'm going to ask you 3 all at once, and then you can just kind of like answer however you want to. Well, I wanted to know if you're talking to someone online, perhaps, that is new to writing humor. Maybe they're a new writer too, but they're new to writing humor, and they want to add humor to their writing. What piece of advice would you give to get them started on that? So that was one question. All of these questions actually kind of mean the same thing. Like, how would a person learn humor? And then, like, what craft tips can you give to writers that want to add humor? So it's kind of all the same question, really, but different takes on it.
The biggest premise for humor is that it is something that's unexpected. And you can use that in a dark way or in a funny way. And if you take the 2 different things and juxtapose them so that, like, there's this really common thing and this really wild and crazy thing, or just it becomes wild and crazy because it's unexpected. If you have a grocery list and everything on the grocery list is common items like milk and cheese and eggs, and the last item on the list is just something random and
a plunger.
A plunger.
Well, that's kind of common, I guess.
It might be common. A pair of handcuffs, or a saw for chopping, or a axe for chopping off someone's head, or like if like that would be unexpected. Maybe just an axe wouldn't be enough. A plunger to unplug the restrained voices of the mute children. I don't know. I just said that on the spot, so it's just kind of weird, but my brain is weird. So, but like the idea is that you are taking the unexpected, and that is usually what's causing humor. It can also be used for horror, because that item might be so unexpected, it creates a different emotional reaction. So it depends how it's used and what the context is and what's around it. You usually want to save that humorous line as it's a punchline, so you're saving it for the last moment of a list or the last part of a paragraph or the last part of a dialogue, so it doesn't get lost in there. But it should be something that people are not expecting. The more humor that you read, that you watch, the more you read the comic, like Sunday comics, or you just read whatever it is that you enjoy that's humorous, the more it's going to help you develop your own personal style, and you're going to know what you like as humor, but you're also going to see examples that work. And if you are doing, it is research, but it's also just enjoyable entertainment.
Right.
If you like humor, it's enjoyable. If this is torture for you, either
then you're not a writer of humor.
either you're looking at the wrong kind of humor, or maybe humor is not for you. I would say, like, don't torture yourself. But I would say, like, doing that research is part of it, but also analyzing and dissecting, why is this working? Like, what about the humor is funny to you? What moment did you laugh? And sometimes I will, in classes that I teach on humor, I will have students write down the moments, like, laughed here and laughed here and laughed here, and then we look at it again and say, like, well, what was it specifically that made you laugh? What about this joke caused that emotional reaction in you? So research, but also analysis helps.
Okay, analysis. Awesome. Great tips. Is there anything that you want to add? I don't know if you came prepared with about something you wanted to talk about. Is there anything you want to add to the humor conversation?
No, I'm not naturally funny. It takes me a long time, like, I'm writing, and then I go back to a sentence and I say, this is okay, but I have to, like, rearrange the elements and do it. So, like, off
the cuff. Yeah.
I'm not funny.
Improv funny is not your thing.
Once in a while it happens accidentally, and then I write it down.
Yay! That's awesome. All right. Well, where can people find you online and find your books? And yeah.
The easiest place, I'm going to see if I can bring this a little closer, is on my website, serenadory.com, and you can find my books there. You can find other information there, but you can also find my books on Amazon. The publishers for some of my books are selling them in, various other platforms, but I think Amazon is usually the easiest place because everything is there all at once. If you believe Amazon is evil, then you some people do. You sometimes I do. You can go to my website and find information as well, and I do list when I'm teaching classes on my website, as well as information about, like, here's where I have a short story published for free and things like that.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for coming on the Right Now show. And next week we are going to be talking about women writing, women's voices in writing. So until next time, go right now.